Hey pastors and leaders, Matt here, one of the support pastors with Leaders Following Christ. We'd like to take a little bit of time today and let's talk about taking our spiritual formation seriously. When I say ours, I mean ours. Not the people we lead, not those that we shepherd and guide, but ours. Because we're pastors. Since we're pastors, that means that it's really, really easy for things like sermon prep and staff meetings and Sunday setup start to substitute that real personal walk that we have with Jesus. So this month, we're not going to talk about how to grow others. We're going to talk about how to grow ourselves. And we're going to ask some hard questions. All right? One thing to start to consider as we go through this today is, are you taking your own spiritual formation seriously? Or are you just doing ministry prep? Another way to look at this would be if someone were to maybe look at your calendar for this past month. Would they be able to tell that you were a Christian? Or would they just be able to tell that you worked for a church or were a pastor? In other words, are you setting time aside specifically for your own spiritual journey? We want to root this in Scripture, obviously, so let's take some time and look at 1 Timothy chapter 4. We're going to look at verses 7 and 8. Do not waste time arguing over godless ideas and old wives' tales. Instead, train yourself to be godly. Physical training is good, but training for godliness is much better, promising benefits in this life and in the life to come. Now, if you've been with us for a couple of months, you know that it seems like we're on this Paul Timothy kick here recently for the last handful of our times together. And this month is no different because Paul isn't writing this letter to just some random believer. He's writing it to Timothy, who we know was a young pastor. Paul knows that the people most likely to neglect their own spiritual growth were the ones busiest that were doing the ministry for everyone else. Nothing's changed. That's still true today. So the first part of the scripture that I want us to look at is from the beginning of verse 7. Let's talk about training ourselves because formation is intentional. It's not accidental. Like I said, verse 7 says, train yourself to be godly. The Greek word behind train is gymnazo. I may be mispronouncing that. For all my biblical scholars out there, I'm really sorry. But that's where we get the word gymnasium. See, Paul is picturing an athlete with a deliberate regime, right? Not someone who wanders into shape by accident. This is someone that's doing the work day in, day out, really being intentional with their time. Because no one drifts into good shape and being an athlete, and no one drifts into godliness. You drift into busyness, you drift into distraction, and you can drift into burnout. But we never drift into being more like Christ. It takes intentionality. So with that in mind, here's a question that I want us to think about, and we'll throw it up on the screen for you here. What does intentional training for your own soul actually look like right now? And then where has ministry preparation quietly replaced your personal formation in your week? All right, the second part of this I want to look at is from verse 8. We're going to look at godliness is truly the better investment. In verse 8 it says, physical training is good, but training for godliness is much better, promising benefits in this life and in the life to come. Now, obviously, Paul isn't knocking physical discipline. He's just putting it into perspective for us. See, pastors, we will invest in almost anything that we feel like will grow our church. Leadership books, conferences, systems, staff development, even this very pastor circle that you're spending time watching today. All of those are great things, right? And they're necessary and they're important. But Paul says godliness outperforms every one of them. So with that priority mindset, here's a couple more questions for you to take a few moments and really think about. If you're honest, where have you been investing your energy this year? Your leadership skills or your godliness? And then what's one thing you'd have to say no to in order to say yes to your own formation? And the third thing that I want us to talk about today is, has your life matched your message? Later in this same chapter, where Paul is writing to Timothy, we see Paul say in verse 12 and verse 16, "Be an example to all believers in what you say, in the way you live, in your love, your faith, and your purity. Keep a close watch on how you live and on your teaching. Stay true to what is right for the sake of your own salvation and the salvation of those who hear you." Did you notice the order of things that he addressed? Watch yourself first, then watch your teaching. See, your congregation isn't just listening to your sermons. They're watching your life. Because formation isn't some little private hobby for a pastor. Because our life is on public display, it means that people see it. So our life and what we do with it has to be the foundation that everything else stands on. So to finalize our time together, here's our last couple of discussion questions that we want you to consider. Would the people closest to you say that your private walk with God matches what you preach on Sunday? And then is there one place that maybe right now you're preaching something that you're not currently practicing in your own life? I know some of these questions are hard and heavy, but if we're going to live the life that God's created for us, and if we're going to lead the way that God has created us to lead, then we have to take our personal formation seriously. So take some time this week. Really consider what we've talked about. Look at your personal life, because as we move into this busy season of ministry that's coming up next for us, we need to have these things in place well before things start ramping up. Thanks so much for taking some time with us. We appreciate you. Have a wonderful rest of your day.